So I just want to congratulate him on the great job he's done with Homeland Security, and I have no doubt that he will be an absolutely superb chief of staff.
Seated directly across the table from the president in the second meeting, only the second meeting of the Trump cabinet today, was Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who the president has publicly attacked and demeaned on Twitter and rolled his eyes about when asked shouted questions by reporters. After a weekend of some speculation that the president might try to move Jeff Sessions to fill the new opening of Secretary of Homeland Security so that the president could then install a new attorney general who could then fire Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller, the White House press secretary was authorized to say this today.
There are no conversations about any cabinet members moving in any capacity, and the president has 100% confidence in all members of his cabinet.
Joining us now, Al Hunt. He is the columnist at Bloomberg View, and Betsy Woodruff, a politics reporter for the Daily Beast. Al, General Kelly has a lot to deal with, not the least of which is this latest maneuver being rumored about that the White House seemed ready to spike today, which is moving of Jeff Sessions, new attorney general, firing of Mueller. It sounds like that was a Kelly-authorized statement today with the 100% confidence and no one's moving.
Yeah, it does, Lawrence. Look, the whole Jeff Sessions brouhaha was about one single thing, that Trump wants to get rid of Bob Mueller. And in his mind, the question is, how does he do it? And will he do it? It has nothing to do with Jeff Sessions. There's no policy disagreements with Jeff Sessions. He's furious about Mueller being there. What he's furious about, we can all speculate. What he's trying to hide, we can all speculate. But, you know, it's remarkable. This should not be on the table. Bob, there is no one in law enforcement who commands the kind of bipartisan respect that Bob Mueller does. He's doing a job. He was appointed by Trump's Justice Department. It's a serious investigation. And the notion that this president would really be looking for ways to get rid of him is just a travesty.
I want to read another passage from tonight's breaking news report from the Washington Post, which says Trump, his advisors say that these are the leaking, unnamed, anonymous advisors in the Washington Post. They say that Trump is increasingly acting as his own lawyer, strategist, and publicist, often disregarding the recommendations of the professionals he has hired. He refuses to sit still, the presidential advisors said. He doesn't think he's in any legal jeopardy, so he really views this as a political problem he's going to solve by himself. And Betsy, if he doesn't think he's in any legal jeopardy, why hasn't he been able to follow the advice that any lawyer would give him if he was not in any legal jeopardy, which is just to, step back and let this process take care of itself?
That's a good question. I think a big part of the reason for this is that the president just isn't the kind of person who thinks long and hard about the law and legal culture and the way that lawyers think and the difference between the court of public opinion and actual court of law. Remember, unlike the prior president, Trump does not have any sort of law background. He's been a businessman. He's never been a lawyer. He hasn't had any sort of formal legal education besides what he's just seen in his time as a businessman in New York. And based on my coverage of the Justice Department, speaking with current and former officials, one sense that I get is that people who professionally work in the legal world see Trump as someone who just doesn't whatsoever get it. They see him as someone who treats lawyers like means to an end, right? Who sees lawyers as tools that he can use to accomplish his larger goals, rather than as people who are integral parts of the way that our system of justice works. And I think that's part of the reason that the president's relationship with so many of his lawyers has been so messy and complicated, and also part of the reason why he has been his own biggest stumbling block in terms of legal problems, both individually and in terms of his administration as a whole.
Al Hunt, so we have an Irish guy from Boston, chief of staff of the White House. I think the last one of those might have been Kenny O'Donnell for President Kennedy. No relation to me. But he's not a political guy. This is someone who's been in the military. This is someone who's accustomed to people following orders. He's accustomed to having a lot of honor and decency around him in the workplace. What's your prediction for how General Kelly manages this new White House?
Well, as a guest in your previous segment said, I think it's an impossible task, and I don't think he will succeed. I would just add to one thing that Betsy said, that not only does Trump not have respect for the law, he is, to be perfectly candid, a chronic liar. It has been enumerated by the Washington Post, Politico. He just does it. He's pathological about it. Any good lawyer really has difficulty with a client who's a pathological liar. I think General Kelly is going to have an enormous problem here. I also disagree with Jeremy Bash that getting rid of Scaramucci speaks volumes. If you couldn't do that, that was the easiest thing in the world.
Right.
I mean, from second one. But Lawrence, just to go quickly to your question, look at those White House chief of staffs who succeeded. Jim and Howard Baker, John Podesta, Leon Panetta, Josh Bolton, Rahm Emanuel. What do they share in common, Lawrence? They all know the ways of Washington. They all know politics in the broadest sense of the word. General Kelly is a very respected Marine Corps general, but he's got a very narrow background in that sense. And I think the White House chief of staff is not a management job. It's a political job.
And Betsy, it's the top political job in Washington, pure political job. And General Kelly does have experience in the Pentagon working on defense appropriations bills and lobbying the House and the Senate on that. But that's really the only legislative experience he's ever had. That tells you nothing about how to handle finance and ways and means on tax bills and all these other forms of legislation that are moving, the health care legislation, which is behind us now. So he doesn't have, it's hard to point to people with less experience, I guess Mac McClarty for Bill Clinton at the beginning, in that arena of actual domestic governance in Washington.
For sure, and I think that's very much by design. Before General Kelly's name was batted around as someone who potentially could run the Department of Homeland Security, there were reports that he actually told some of his confidants that he specifically did not want to be in any administration. He didn't want to be a creature of the Beltway. He doesn't see it as, his natural habitat at all. Of course, there's this perhaps no particular job that puts you closer to the epicenter of the D.C. Beltway than being the president's chief of staff. My understanding, based on conversations with current and former DHS officials, with folks who've worked with him in the past, is that this isn't a gig that he was jonesing for, and that how I view it is a big part of the reason that he took this position is that the president asked him to, right? Secretary Kelly is not a political ladder climber. Obviously, you have to have some sort of political background to get to be a four-star general, but this isn't someone who, based on my understanding, had any sort of electoral ambitions. But given his time in the military, given his understanding of the importance of authority, hierarchy, chains of command, if the president asked him to do something, which is obviously the case, he wouldn't say no. And I think the important counterpart to that is, in the same way that General Kelly didn't want to say no to the president, he'll expect his subordinates not to say no to him. And that's why you're seeing Scaramucci on his way out, potentially with others to follow.
Al, my experience in politics and government in Washington tells me that General Kelly better have the resignation letter in his pocket at all times, and he better have informed the president about exactly what will provoke his resignation letter, because that's what his power will come from. His power will come from the threat of the disruption of his resignation if the president does not follow his advice on X or Y.
That is a mighty sword he has, Lawrence, if he's willing to use it. He's got to start by telling the president you can't lie. You just can't go out there every day and lie. That's going to be a tough conversation. I would remind you that the last time we brought a general in to really take care of a beleaguered presidency was Alexander Haig for Richard Nixon. That didn't turn out so well, did it?
Well, Alexander Haig ended up being the first chief of staff for President Jerry Ford when he moved up. Al Hunt, thank you for that historical perspective. Very helpful. Appreciate it. Betsy Woodruff, thank you for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.